Today, I'm excited to have a chat with a new friend whose work is so powerful. I know you're going to find it interesting and want to share with others, especially those who have a family member with autism. Kim Pomares is the CEO of Mendability, a company founded by his mother, Claudie Pomares, to enhance brain health through sensory enrichment therapy. Kim joined Mendability to make its innovative approach accessible to those who need it most by validating the program in randomized controlled trials and developing a computer system to prescribe affordable, customized programs for families worldwide. When I learned about Kim's business, a couple things stood out to me about their approach and him as a person. The first thing that really resonated was Kim's reframing of the problem. My son had difficulty fitting in school right from the start, yet he was never diagnosed with anything specific. I became a researcher, learning about sensory integration, how his eyes weren't teaming quite right, and even forms of giftedness like intensity that weren't recognized or appreciated at school. We enrolled in programs that were so expensive, and I wondered about all the families who couldn't afford them. We started trying to integrate those strategies at home. When we brought specific strategies to the school, we were told over and over that it wasn't their job. When they demanded we get him evaluated, we brought back the report done by a psychologist at the renowned Children's Hospital. It noted that teachers would have to work to keep him engaged because he was smart. Well, the principal literally said, "That's not our job." Even when the superintendent personally intervened to get him additional resources, the teachers were pissed. And my son was then marked and resented by the school administration. It was crazy. It was so frustrating, and advocating just didn't work overall. Outside of an ally here and there, we just kept getting told it wasn't their job to engage children in learning. I'm not being hyperbolic. When my son was 8 and in third grade, he said, "Mom, I learn more from watching National Geographic than from my teachers." And I don't share this to get down on teachers. They get demonized enough, and they work in a system that many are trying to bleed dry and even dismantle. Although this was the wealthiest school district in the state. Of course, we tried to be supportive at home, but all the programs out there took place outside of the home, in an office someplace. Kim really got my attention when he suggested that if parents were willing to play essentially the role of therapist for their child, the stress and damage done during the day at school could be undone after school. Mendability teaches parents how to be a coach for their child to reduce their stress, calming them, which helps their brain work better and increases joy, which isn't that what we want for our children? The second thing Kim talked about that really got my attention had to do with the brain's natural healing capacity, specifically the role of combining sensory experiences like smell and touch. I think Kim's work at Mendability is actually soul work. Each time they strengthen the relationship between parents and children and impart knowledge about our brain's natural healing properties without them needing to be the expert, they impact the future, which is so uncertain right now. Instead of feeling victimized by circumstances we can't control or change, Mendability empowers parents and even teachers. Their stress probably goes down too, which in turn relieves children from having to carry the stress of others as well. So let's get started. Welcome, Kim. How are you doing today?
I'm great. This
Well,
is my first podcast.
I didn't know that. Hey,
It
how
is. I've never been a guest. Well, I've been a guest on, that's not true. I did. Well, it wasn't podcast. They were called radio, online radio at the
okay.
time. That
All
I
right.
think I just dated myself.
Well, how lucky am I then? I get you for the first time. So, I thought I'd just start by, a way for people to get to know you, like, what are you focused on these days? And I love your work. And, I'm coming at this from a depth psychology lens, a more soulful lens. But as I listen and learn more about your work, I think it connects with it's relationship oriented, really. And I'm so sick of the obsession with the brain. In so many ways, what science discovers is really what sages knew thousands of years ago. So, um, anyway, so and also I gave you a question ahead of time, like, what have you learned recently that's new and exciting for you? So whatever you want to share to warm us up.
Yeah, well, the thing that is getting me excited today is actually relationship stuff.
Ooh,
Um, but it's going to be brain stuff, so I hope you don't mind.
not of
Um,
course. If we
w-
can bring both together, that's the whole
all right,
point.
let's do
Yeah.
this. The there's a paper that just came out, well, came out maybe a few months ago now, that show that specific tactile experiences trigger release of oxytocin. Now, this has been around, but they weren't sure how and when and where. And so this paper underlined and clarified a few things. And so we incorporated this into our therapeutic approach. But as we were doing that, we were looking at ways to, because oxytocin, for your listeners, is the social hormone. It's when your brain releases oxytocin and you're interacting with another human being or even an animal, your brain, your body wants to connect, wants to form a bond with that individual animal.
Oh, thank you. I actually didn't know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that we work with have got social things that are labeled as social skills difficulties.
Hmm.
Um, and so we got really excited that we can get the brain to regulate its bonding mechanisms
Wow.
from a physiological perspective
That
by
is
doing very
exciting.
simple things.
Hmm.
Simple things like a hand massage or a foot massage. This is what the study found out is that it's not all tactile activities. Well, all tactile activities in a way trigger release of oxytocin, but hand massage and foot massage in particular are strongly correlated, very strongly correlated to a strong release of oxytocin. So now we get all of our clients to do some form of hand massage or foot massage. But then we also, at the same time, it's really cool how the universe brings things together sometimes. We were consulting with parenting experts on how we could help kids do therapy in a way that doesn't feel like therapy.
Yeah.
Because they're sick and tired of having to be told to perform a certain way and to learn
Yeah.
things that they don't care about and do things they don't want to do. And this idea of doing therapy as a group, involving a third person in a session, and everybody is doing it to one another, all of a sudden feels like it's a special moment between the
Yeah.
three of them. And it's no longer a therapist and a child, a therapist and an adult, or a parent acting as a therapist doing therapy at home and a child. And so all of these together, we're even rebranding almost. We're so excited about this that we're rebranding our approach as a family-centered brain games type of approach. It was always family-centered. It was always, we always believed that parents are the experts of their children in ways that a therapist will never be able to aspire. And and that's why we love training the parents and getting them to do this therapy. But the idea that we could trigger the bonding and the
Mm.
social and develop the social skills, or I don't like talking about social skills. I like talking about developing an interest and a comfort level and a confidence level in engaging with other human beings. I think this is what parents really want, and this is the natural way of because you go to social groups classes and where if somebody says this and smiles this way, then you have to do this way and make sure you shake people's hand and a firm grip and not too firm and eye contact and all that stuff that's like so mechanical and so
Yeah.
uninteresting.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
anyway, so
and
that's what's
it's and in a way it's not authentic, it's not genuine, it's more like superficial. Well, that is super exciting. And so many thoughts came up for me about that. The first being, and I'll bring in a chakra lens here, which is really just about energy centers. But, the hands and the feet are considered the root chakra. And the root chakra has to do with us feeling grounded. And I know my son had some sensory integration issues. And so I learned a little bit about it. And I learned how, for some children, they feel like they're floating around in space, like they don't feel grounded. And can you imagine, just like that must be terrifying. So how could you even focus on connecting with another human being if you don't feel like connected to your own existence in the
E-
world?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And when we teach that to parents, that kids don't have a sense of self and they're where they are in space, and I love how you
Yeah.
describe it as they feel like they're just floating with
Yeah.
no anchor, with no grounding.
Yeah.
It feels like a breakthrough to them. It's like, of course, if they don't even know where they are, how can they relate or even want to relate?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's all about wanting to relate and being comfortable to relate. Yes,
Oh, I
totally.
love that. And the other thing it reminds me of is back when I mean, I'm grateful for the time that I started my family because there was so much research on fertility and how to really prepare yourself. And there was, I mean, it seems so intuitive, of course, but the research about like skin to skin touch with your
Mm.
newborn. So I don't know if that's an
Kangaroo
oxytocin thing
care.
or something else. Well, I never like care. I was never into like strapping a baby to me, like walking around, but I spent a lot of time laying on the couch with like skin to skin contact with my just them sleeping.
Yes.
So it reminds me of that. And the last thing it reminds me of is Playworks. So Playworks is a national organization that is evidence based, research based, uses play to transform a school culture, but it is about community building. And so play is sort of not purposeful in a task or outcome oriented way, but it is about,
Well, it's
sort of,
what you learn. It's the dynamics of
yeah,
challenging I was gonna say enemy in air quotes. It's not about that, but it's challenging how far you can go in your relationship with a person and finding where the boundaries are. And that
yeah,
happens in play, and then you end up and this doesn't happen as much anymore, and you need programs like Playworks to come in and
yeah.
reintroduce this sort of natural have fun and play and
Yeah, and then
cowboy.
and it's about community and our most like exciting testimonials were always from the special ed teachers. So there was something around Playworks because it was instead of the special needs children having to conform to community, the emphasis was put on the community making space and welcoming the special needs children. And they just said like there was such a jump in their happiness of being at
Yes,
school. So yeah, so
yes.
that's what you're talking. I mean, that is like a sensory integration. And I think it's relevant to bring up that the root of knowing is to relate. And so focusing too much on like the brain and tasks is incomplete knowing, right? To relate us through the body. And so when you're
To
talking about, touch and combining, aroma and skin and touch, we experience through the body. The mind is only part of it.
I I have a study in mind it's really dramatic. It ends very badly for the animals in the study. And it's one of the last studies that was done before they put in some rules to protect animals.
Yeah.
But one of the so that study, and you must have heard of it because it's really famous. Late 60s, early 70s, two sets of monkeys. I can't remember. I think they were macaque monkeys, baby pups, and they never knew their mother. But in their cages, they place either a wire with a bottle,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's kind of shaped like a mom monkey. Do
Hmm.
you know that study?
Yeah.
You- Oh yeah, and then and there's another one that doesn't give food at all, but is soft to the touch.
Mm, mm,
Well, most of the monkeys died. They
yeah.
preferred to not go feed. They preferred the
Oh, oh
tactile
my God.
sensation of, and this is one of the leading studies in the importance of touch. There's another study that was done with mice where the mom was able to lick her pup. And then there's a mom that wasn't allowed to lick her pup, but the pup was in the presence of the mother. And a third group where the pups weren't in their mom's presence; they were separated from their mother. But a lab technician would go and simulate the licking with a brush
Hmm.
on the back. And the one with mom and the one without mom, so long as they were touched, were able to release and regulate their serotonin production, which is
Oh,
what you
wow.
need for learning, brain growth, feeling in control, processing the
Hmm.
environment, and yeah, the importance of touch from a
Yeah.
physiological and brain obsessed
Yeah.
perspective.
Wow. Wow. I was going to say let's dig in, but I feel like we already have. Well, let's talk about you and how you got here. Because as a depth psychologist, I'm always curious about people's journey and how they got to where they are. And sometimes we answer the hero's call and sometimes we don't, or sometimes we have to be tricked into a certain situation that provides the experience that we need in order to get to like our full purpose. And I feel like this is your purpose. And then of course add in there that you're in a family business.
Hmm.
That's always tricky.
I
So,
quit so many
oh,
times.
yeah, until I guess you had what you needed in order for you to come back and find your role, I suppose. So tell us, yeah, tell us the story.
Okay, I think I have to start with this recurring dream that I had as a teenager.
Oh, okay, you got to tell me a dream.
I thought you would like that.
Yep.
I can see a doll's house and a bunch of very unhappy kids, teenagers are flocking to this house. So if I don't know, it's like I'm a giant and I'm looking at regular sized people, but the front of the house is cut off and I can see what's happening outside and inside the house. And I can see that the kids are unhappy. They walk in and there's cool stuff. It's fuzzy what happens. I'm not fuzzy on the details of what happens, but I know that they're happy inside. And I had this dream two or three times, and I felt an urge or a calling to contribute and maybe set up houses like this or help people in that way.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, one thing led to another. I also watch a movie where this guy um he finds a cure for cancer, I think. I don't remember what it was, but I felt this urge and this calling. I'm going to find a cure for cancer. So I decide college is going to be biochemistry. And then I graduate and then I decide to go on a mission as a church missionary, and I'm assigned to go to Greece. And I spent
Mm.
some time there, and I realized the state of disarray politically, economically, a lot of suffering in Eastern Europe. And I think, and that's why I come back and say, okay, I'm going to do international law. So there's this urge to do something to make a dent in the universe.
Yeah.
But I can't put my finger on it. But when you see how it goes back to this house in the end, then I feel like that was the original calling. And I've always, and actually, it's funny. Um, I, I there's this volunteer organization locally called I can't remember what it's called, but they're the first responders for emotional distress.
Mm.
So if somebody's just lost a person or usually death or gravely ill situation, they send trained volunteers to go and be the shoulder to cry on.
Oh.
Except they didn't take me in. There's a recruitment process. And I was like, what? I'm
Oh,
your ideal candidate.
you wanted a job and they were like they
And they
rejected
and they
you?
said, yeah, your profile, we call that Superman syndrome.
Oh.
And you you will destroy yourself in this volunteer capacity.
Um,
You can We need people who are not so keen on helping.
yeah.
We need people who can be stable and anchored
Mm.
and your profile doesn't is not ideal for this position. So anyway, I'm psychologically profiled as Superman syndrome, which explains everything, this international law. But while I was in school to do international law, I did graphic design because I love to doodle, and I thought, why not make money doodling? Because I knew that it was going to take a long time to get into law, and I thought I'd make some money to get there. And so I went to college to formalize my training in graphic design, and I set up a graphic design business and really quite successful at it, starting to pick up speed. I'm still in school. And my mother, this whole time, she's in, she had gone in her 60s to school to learn how to help people with their brain. And I knew she was doing that, but it's my mom. Of all really, I mean, she wasn't credible in my mind
Right.
as, finding the cure for cancer or whatever. But she was doing a good job, and she asked me to help her because her private clinic was growing. She was getting more and more government contracts, and it was just growing beyond her capacity to manage. And she said, "Hey, you're doing this thing with your business. Can you help me?" And I said, "Sure, Mom, I'll come and help you. I'll get you organized, and we'll recruit some people, get you a team, and then I'll go back to what I love." And then this is when I realized the impact of what she was doing. It
Mm,
was miracle after miracle after
mm,
miracle. We had, we were talking about kids who walking, talking. We had adults with stroke, completely
oh,
recovering. We had
mm,
people, seniors with Parkinson's, and it is like, wow, this is amazing. But there's no clinical evidence. There wasn't the stuff that I needed to anchor
yeah.
to formalize this. So that this is one, okay, Mom, yes, but you need a whole lot more than just a better private clinic. We need to do randomized controlled trials. We need to do this. We need to do
Wow.
that. But this is how I got where I'm at today. And that was 25 years ago now. So,
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, thanks for sharing. I'm stuck on your Superman complex. You could think about, that saying that we teach what we need to learn,
uh-huh.
right? So like the need to rescue
Yes.
can be mirrored back to like, oh, what in me needs to be rescued? And maybe that's worked itself out, but that would be
I don't
something
know.
that would be something to wonder about.
You just poked somewhere and
I
it's like, I
know.
don't know if it's supposed to hurt there.
That's what I do. No, it's just like, well, if it resonated, it did. Now you have something to wonder about. If not,
Mm.
like, oh, whatever. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I know you're not an expert in this, you already said, and but I like this concept of neurodivergent, and I loved the movie series Divergent. Divergent? Oh, I was like, man,
I know my
yeah.
kids read the book.
Oh,
Oh, no, we watched the movies. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yes.
whole concept of like, oh, society needs to like put you in a box, and then there's this, this time of specialization. So, if you are really talented in that, that's all you should do and become an expert in that, and then you lose your sense of fluidity. And so anyway, I like it because I feel that people who are considered neurodivergent or neuro not neurotypical or whatever it is, that they kind of are like taking it and claiming it. And I have interviewed Cher Griffin a couple of times, and she's probably 40 now, but she was a late diagnosed ADHD. She was gifted, but wasn't able to really like maximize that. So she didn't have resources to really express her giftedness. And um and what else? And I think is she have maybe on the spectrum for autism. And so, she has created a community called the Compassion Collective, and it specifically intersects with substance abuse too. because sometimes when you are not welcome by society for who you are, right? There is a, what do you do when you feel lonely? And this really connects with the sensory enrichment too, right? Because if you're not even with people, much less being touched, then there, that can lead to relationship with substance. But she pulled herself out of that. And that's kind of her specialty now, is like really, and I think a lot of us are exploring, like, what is the relationship that we have with substance? What is it sort of replacing?
Mm,
So anyway, so she's just, we call those people misfits. Like by now, I think I probably got a little ADHD, got a little Asperger's, got a little this, got a little that, but I didn't know. Nobody said there was really anything wrong with me. I just had to find my own way. And so I kind of, I just like it. And also normal isn't necessarily good. Normal just means norm. So everybody like says normal like it's good. And we need to evolve. So, and there's a light and dark side to all traits. And I've shared this with people, but I find autism very interesting in particular because there is this extreme connection with the inner world. I mean, we don't even know what it's like in there for those kids who have autism. And, them showing up as this, this emergence of this intense inner connection in depth psychology, we would say, what is that mirroring back to the rest of us? The need for us to get invited into their inner world instead of imposing on them. And then also maybe mirroring back the need for us to get connected. Carl Jung, you would say, the last frontier is our inner world, not the ocean and space. It's our inner world because most of us is in our inner world. So anyway, I love misfits. So I'm just curious about, I don't know, your thought about neurodivergence and just, what do you think is being mirrored back by, your work with these awesome kids?
First of all, I want to say I've put my foot in it many times when it comes to this. In fact, when we named our company Mendability,
Hmm.
we received a lot of negative feedback. This idea that we're here to mend abilities.
I love
And
it. What's wrong with that?
well, okay. And it says we're not here to mend, we're not broken, we're just different, right? Or like Temple Grandin says,
Oh,
different, not less. Or
okay. I
and I
see.
totally agreed with
Hmm.
this. I didn't realize that what we were saying with our company is when you come to us, we'll fix you.
Oh, okay. I
And
get it.
it's and then we said, no, 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 we're not fixing you. We're fixing abilities. We're fixing the kids who can't sleep, the kids who can't be touched, the kids who are who struggle, who are just not happy. We want to
Yeah.
make the kids happy. That's all we care. I don't care if
Right.
they talk. I don't care if they go to school. I don't care what they do in life, so long as
Yeah.
they're happy, comfortable. And I think so. The neurodivergent community is really good at creating awareness around the issue. Hey, we're different. Welcome the difference, and
Yeah.
maybe be more proactive about creating a community that is comfortable for the people who are not comfortable in their world today.
Yeah.
Can maybe become more comfortable if we make some accommodations. There's more and more sensory friendly movies with not quite as loud, or sensory friendly restaurants where if maybe darker and not as many
Not
lights and quieter stuff.
overstimulating and
That's
yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
some people with sensory processing issues are not comfortable and with stuff that we take for granted.
Hmm.
Lighting in schools, now everybody is into non-flickering lights because those kids could see the flickering
Oh my.
all the time. They could not.
I'm really sensitive to that. All I have to do is go into Walgreens and I'm just like, yeah, I get a headache. Yeah.
There must, I don't know what it is. I haven't really looked into it, but I know that I'm really tired when I come out of a mall. Really
Mm.
exhausted. I
Mm.
just don't like going in. It's not fun for me. There's no pleasure in
It's too
there.
much
I go
stimulate.
in,
Same.
and yes. So that's one
You
example.
might also be introverted too.
Oh, I'm sure I am. When I
Yeah.
need to recharge, I don't want to talk to
Yep.
anybody.
There. Yep. You might be on the extreme of the introversion scale.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I
Yeah.
were. Um, so what we and so it's great, and we don't want to impede on that, and we don't want people to feel like we're there to change them. We're not there
Yeah.
to do that at all. But
Yeah.
our name seems to convey that maybe that we're trying to change them. And but it's funny. I had to learn that. I wasn't aware of that. Our motivation has always been to help people
Yeah.
feel comfortable, but we didn't realize that some of the language we were using was offensive to some people. We ran the most popular article we ever put on our blog was it was a quiz. Do you want to be called an autistic person or a person with autism? We had, I think, 20,000 people vote on this in like a
Wow.
month.
What was the result?
It was kind of 50-50.
Oh, isn't that fascinating?
Um, but and we can't analyze it because we didn't ask people any more information. We
Yeah.
didn't ask them what their age were. We didn't ask them if they had
Mm.
if they were neurodivergent or if they were caring for someone who was. So we can't really say anything beyond the fact
Yeah.
that it is a popular topic and we weren't quite as aware of it. So now having said that, um, I don't want I want to be a voice also for the parents who feel uh that they don't belong in this neurodivergent
Mm.
movement because their kids are never
Oh.
going to be able to be comfortable no matter what accommodation you put in. They're the people who physically harm themselves, break their skin, break
Mm.
bones, that kind of
Mm.
stuff. People who will never be able to talk, who will never be able to do certain things. I'm
Yeah.
talking about severe
Yeah.
dysfunction. And these are also neurodivergent if you look at the technical definition of the autism spectrum. I hope that one day they split the autism
Mm.
spectrum into, different categories because I'm autistic according to the definition of the autism spectrum. Everybody is almost, and it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good for embracing diversity. Maybe it's a
Hmm.
good way of doing that, but there's a lot of parents out there who just feel offended. No, my kid has issues. He
Yeah.
needs help.
Right.
He needs mendability. He needs his abilities mended.
Right.
And so there's a place for that.
Mm.
And this is where we usually end up working anyway. We don't work a lot with parents who have children who with some accommodations will end up po
Mm.
probably being able to live a semi-independent life,
Yeah.
pay taxes, and have relationships. That so so anyway,
Mm.
those are my thoughts on the
Oh,
subject.
well, I mean, I love it. I love your attitude is one of curiosity and continual learning and being
Yeah,
fluid,
yeah.
and just valuing people. Like I like it. We
I
we just want kids to feel
If
joy.
you talked to me 25, 30 years ago, you would not have liked me. I don't like the young me. I was an overzealous, self-righteous, very black and white
Well, but that's how
man. I
that's how
think
we
is
are. I was when I think about how the fights I used to get in with people and my opinionated nature in my 20s, I go, ooh, ee. But
Ooh,
that was what you needed to be. It's like I call that
I guess.
arrogant confidence because otherwise you wouldn't take the risks that you did if you didn't have that arrogant confidence. And then over
Mm,
time you become humbled and you have experiences, but you need you're going to have to accept that part of you. You do.
I accepted that it was
Good.
part of my development.
It's still part of you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see what
don't keep
I'm
them in the
like.
closet. Don't keep them in the closet. Just
What do I do with him? What
value
do I do
him.
with 19-year-old
You
me?
just say, "Hey, buddy, I know you're there. You're part of why I'm the way I am. Thanks."
Okay.
So we have a lot of dialogue with inner characters in my work. So, okay, so now let's get to your expertise, which is the brain's natural healing capacity. And I know you have some stories to bring, and stories are, the best way for people to truly know and understand. And stories usually have okay, what was the issue? What was the challenge? And what happened during this experience with you? And And then how has life changed? How have these kids' sense of themselves really? How has that changed, and how do they see their future now that they couldn't see before?
Okay,
So yeah,
okay.
you just share
So
any way you want. You share.
I think I want to start with this senior came to us. Some okay. I got a, we've been doing this for a long time, so there's some stories that stand out in the context of this conversation. Um, but the first one I want to share is not neurodivergent.
Mhm.
He's just a 80-year-old man with late stage Parkinson's.
Mm.
He needed to take a pill to then 5 minutes later he could take himself to the bathroom, and within 10
Oh,
minutes he would be back into frozen
oh
stage.
my gosh.
So in middle stages you shake, right? And you shake because your brain stops being able to release and produce and regulate dopamine. Dopamine tells your muscles to stop moving. Your
Oh,
muscles are made to move constantly.
oh,
And so when your dopamine doesn't work well, you end up with hyperactivity, for example. You end up with those children who just have this urge to move. It's a
oh my
physiological
gosh.
urge because their dopamine is not slowing them down.
Oh,
And it's
that
funny
explains
because you
my
think of
son when he
dopamine
was
as
young.
this high, as this drug that motivates you, and this is what drives you to move. Physiologically, with muscles, dopamine actually stops you.
Okay.
Um, and so in Parkinson's, you end up with shaking, and then and there's a later stage where you're completely frozen. So this is the stage that this person was at when they
Mm.
came to us. And I remember, I don't know if it was the first or second session, but we had one of the ways to get the brain to produce more, to regulate its dopamine function better, is through the sense of smell. The olfactory bulb is connected to a lot of different parts of the brain, but one of them is the production and regulation center for dopamine. And they call it the second brain because it's so malleable and it's so interconnected. The olfactory bulb
Mm.
is this tiny little thing right between the nose and the brain, and it does so many things, and it's super plastic. If you smell something you like, you release twice as much dopamine instantly as you had.
Oh,
If you combine a nice smell, your favorite candle. I'm looking for something on my desk. I just moved offices, and you know what? I didn't
I'm
bring my
always
smell with
picking
me.
up my candles. They're not even lit, and I just like I'm
Yes.
taking a shot of something.
If you combine that, it's perfect. That's exactly it. If you combine that with any other pleasurable sensory activity like a back tickle, so you grab yourself a back scratcher while you're smelling, your dopamine level goes from 100% more to 300% more. It's
Oh,
huge. We're not, pills can't do that.
do you know what
And
I
it's the
do?
brain. Yeah.
I'll just start like doing this on my legs. So maybe that's my intuition,
Do that
like with
with your
this.
candle on the desk. And I feel really silly
Oh,
that visually I didn't come prepared for
that's
this, and
okay.
I should have been. But so anyway, during our session we train the wife. This She's going to do all these enriching activities, expose the brain to those new experiences in a way that's focused enough and intense enough that it will break through that therapeutic threshold. Because we smell all the time, we touch all the time, we look, this guy was smelling stuff, but how come now when we introduce smell in a new
Mm,
way, all of a sudden his brain
yeah.
changes? Well, that's what happened. But the first time it happened, he started bawling.
Oh,
I was like, oh
yeah.
crap, what have I done?
No, that's
And
good.
and he
Sobbing
said,
is soul shifting.
it feels so good
Oh,
while he was
yeah.
bawling.
Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh.
I wanted, this felt like the first story to share because it says everything that I wish people listening need to know about our program.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it's there to help you feel good, and then it's
Mm,
there to help to change your brain so that you can feel good more of the time.
yeah. Oh,
And
that's
when that happens, all sorts of things can unlock. We can also improve connectivity. We can also improve processing speed, and we'll do that later on. But first, we do that. And
That's
eventually this
beautiful.
person needed less and less of his medication, and he could move around and he could start to live independently. Um,
Wow.
and and we've done that. And this is what my mom was doing again and again and again. And this is what sort of
Wow.
converted me to the impact of, and now that I see the clinical evidence. So what she, well, at the time she was doing this, she was all doing this based on animal studies. And
Mm.
she was translating the protocols to hands-on
Hmm.
things that people could do at home to help their special person. But since then, there have been more and more human studies showing how doing things in an organized way with the environment can have an impact, a
Yeah. Being
permanent
intentional. Yeah.
impact on rewiring the way your brain
Wow.
is wired.
Oh my God. No wonder you're so freaking excited about this stuff.
Right? And
Yeah.
I'm so sad too, because when the first randomized controlled trial was published, so, one of my first contributions was to get, and it took 10 years to get the study
Oh
published.
my gosh.
The first reason was as soon as, the guy, so the scientist at the University of California in Irvine who discovered that pairing smell and touch had this huge impact on dopamine, but also other factors. In fact, combining smell and touch in particular triggers a release of norepinephrine as well as dopamine and stuff like that. And the way it's released, the spike is kind of very similar to the spike you can observe when the brain's learning something new.
Mm.
So we believe that this is, and when you look at, when you observe the behavior changes in the animal and the humans, you say, okay, there's some neuroplasticity stuff happening.
Hmm.
And so we believe this is almost a secret sauce of the program that we have. And so the guy who discovered this in the rat, when we told him we were doing on kids what he was doing on animals, he was super excited. And he's the first one we went to say, "Do you want to do a clinical study?" And they're like, "Absolutely! I'm sick and tired of rats. Give me some people."
Yeah.
So he went out and started to raise funds. And he was friends with the director of the NIH, the National Institute
Okay.
of Health, and they manage funding for research from the government. And he said, hey, this is what I want to study. I did this on animals. It's been proven without clinical evidence, but anecdotally this person in Canada is doing it on kids. I want to validate this. And he was like, sure, what is it? And he talks about smell and touch. Like, you never get funding for this.
Well, yeah, there's no
uh,
pharmaceutical company involved.
it's not what he said. He was basically saying this is too simple. It looks like voodoo. You need to do more research on what it is about touch and what it is about smell that is having this impact, and then validate that. Um, this is when I started to learn that scientists are more interested in the how it works than the whether it works. And this is what
Yeah.
separated my
Yeah.
mother from the rest of the scientists who were studying the same
Yeah.
stuff about the brain, is that she was had a very practical objective. She wanted to help people.
Yeah.
And she was able to say, look, this is risk-free. This will not nobody will get hurt by smelling something.
Right.
Well, that's not true. Now there's all
Well,
sorts of chemicals in smells, and you have to be careful about that.
yeah.
But if you do a back rub on somebody,
Right. And bring in
what's the
some
risk, right?
lavender. Right. And lavender's not going to
Okay,
hurt.
and
Yeah.
and there are ways to stay,
Yeah.
smell a flower. Okay, maybe you're
Yeah.
allergic to pollen. Okay, so maybe you're never completely safe. But compared to taking medication, right, or some of the stuff
With
that's
all the list of side effects. Right.
with all the list of side effects,
Yeah.
what is there to lose? And so she was able to sort of simplify how the brain works and say, when you do this, this has happened. So we're going to do this whenever a kid needs this kind of help, etc. Um, and so the first part that took long was getting the funding. Finally, we found somebody who was a client of ours who knew somebody who had a foundation, blah, blah, blah. So we got
Okay.
the funding for this. And then when he released the study, the peer review results were like, the results are too good to be true. You must have done something wrong.
Oh my
Don't
goodness.
publish this. And it was like, ugh.
Oh.
So he did a second study
Oh
with
my
more kids,
gosh.
more questions, blah, blah, blah.
There's such resistance to anything natural. I mean, it reminds me of bioidentical hormone therapy now. When I was plunged into perimenopause like almost 20 years ago, and my doctor had such a beautiful, like she combined what they used to call complementary medicine with, like, she'd send me to an acupuncturist, even though she had training as a traditional doctor. And so she sent me, I'm like, what is bioidentical progesterone cream? Right. And at the time, the pharmaceutical companies were trying to get it to be illegal to use a natural, because they can't patent naturally occurring things. So
Well,
that's why that occurs to
yep.
me right away, is that your natural approach, get ready. It's threatening to,
We
to the
had
status quo.
first yeah, we had firsthand experience with pharmaceuticals because we told them, hey, we've got this protocol that will stop seizures, but if you keep doing it, the number of seizures also goes down and the
Hmm.
intensity of seizures, the recovery time, and it's super simple. And all it involves is, and we showed them the procedures like, we can't patent that.
Right,
See ya.
exactly. It's naturally
I was
occurring.
it. That was it. That's the end of the conversation. No, let's try
So
and do something together. It was like, not
no,
interested.
no,
But
yeah.
anyway, so then we released, and when the final study was released, then he was comfortable enough, and so the two studies were released like back to back in the same paper. Um, but it just gives you a sense of how um it's too good to be true, too simple. It looks like voodoo, and
Well,
so
these are what the
I'm
women
sad
healers knew way back when, probably. So
because when the
yeah.
papers were released, I really thought the world was like what else did they need to know? It's clinically validated.
Okay, right. But right now, there's a great reorganizing happening right now. And so you have to find your own community, and it's out there. It's out there. It's
Yeah,
it's a different channel that,
yeah,
and they're gonna welcome what you have to.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, we
just
talked to the FDA and the scientists there because we want the FDA to approve our approach as a de novo medical device. And they're like, yeah,
mm,
absolutely. The clinical data is all there.
mm,
We just need one study to kind of connect this dot to this
okay.
dot because in the other studies you didn't really connect it well enough for us. But we're just, I'm going to say $100,000 away from being approved by the FDA.
Well, that's
But
fantastic.
then what? What? Then
Yeah.
what? We
Yeah.
want the bag of pain that is because the next step is reimbursement by Aetna and
Yeah.
Blue Shield and all that stuff. But when you're in that world, it is really, really expensive. And now all of a
Well,
sudden you have to charge 10 times more what you
well,
should
you'll
so
have
that you can cover all the middle people that need to be paid in the process. And
well,
it's I don't
guess
know how I
what?
feel about that.
You have to set aside your mind and go inward for your answer on where to go next on your journey.
Hmm.
So, okay. Well, we had one story. So maybe
One
we can,
story. How many stories do you want? How long do you want me to go?
well, that's why I'm trying to hop to the next question.
Okay.
So I did want to bring in a little bit about adverse childhood experience
Mm,
and this framework of ACEs. And I always assume people are familiar with it, but they're really not. I love knowledge. So I'm like, ooh, this, as a depth psychologist who considers that there's a psychospiritual aspect to all disease, this is just another framework. And 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 of course you focus on children, although your Parkinson's patient was an 80-year-old man. So like
I know, right?
this just stuff is just good for everyone. But anyway, so I don't know if you want to, talk a little bit. You do know something about ACEs. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe connect it then to the sensory enrichment therapy, because when we talk about, you know, reparenting ourselves as adults, or not reparenting, but when we identify my work, when we identify the root of a dysfunctional pattern of thinking and behaving, and then it's, oh, I wasn't grounded with unconditional love, for example. Many of us aren't, right? So then what do we do as adults, right? Then we need to do a therapy on ourselves. And so when you talked about like you know the the sense, I think, what a lot of adults need to focus on is that grounding. And so bringing in sensory enrichment can be part of that. So I don't know, whatever your thoughts are about this, really interesting, what to me seems intuitive, that, the negative experiences of childhood, even if they're rather typical, when added up, each experience, this is how I describe it. As a child, y- a teacher can say something not knowing that they really, truly, deeply hurt a child. And because of that experience, children just move on. So they don't really process the drama of the emotion that they experience, but the emotion stays in their body, number one. And number two, it causes them to avoid or to pursue, right? To pursue either the love that they're looking for or to avoid a certain situation where they had that dramatic experience happen. And then they begin to, their patterns of behaving and thinking and reacting to things start to shape. And then the brain, the brain looks to affirm and confirm the reticular activating system. So that's why eventually in adulthood, we could be like, why am I so dysfunctional? Because those behaviors helped you. They're survival mechanisms, but then they get in the way of the growth. So then it makes sense that if you're not able to process those emotions, that stays in the body, and then you end up with disease. And if these days you can, search for what's the spiritual meaning of cancer. And, some people say that it has to do with the repression of negative emotions that really didn't get expressed. So that's the lens that I use, sort of a soulful psychological lens. But in your therapy, you combine this brain thing, but with relationship. Like, that's what's so beautiful about your work, is that it is like, it brings mind and body together, right? And then you've got the soul in there as well. So I don't know, whatever, wherever you want to go with that.
I if I like to think I'm a spiritual person too.
Mm.
I'm deeply
You
interested in
are.
all those things. I'm not an expert. I haven't really
No.
looked into it except for, the level of interest that I have.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to me how everything is feels connected. You talk
Yeah.
about adverse childhood events, and there's tons. It's funny that you say that people are not aware because
Hmm.
I mean, I guess I'm in that world, so of course I'm aware. There's tons of studies, hundreds, and you reach a level of maturity in the clinical research in that area that now the studies are studies of studies,
Mm.
where you have people doing this called a meta-analysis, where they look at all the studies out there and they'll look for keywords to say, I want to look in all the studies, people who've looked at this exact thing or this
Okay.
particular thing. So, and this is happening now, and it's been
Mm.
happening now for 15 years, these meta-analyses. So it is a mature area of research. Unfortunately, all they've done is to confirm what we kind of already knew, that if you have adverse childhood events in your childhood, they pile up.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool, I guess, to see the statistical correlation. For example, I in preparation for this, I dug up some of the papers and I looked at some of the numbers that are out there, and see if I look like I'm reading, it's because I am, as I don't have those figures and numbers memorized. But they were like, it's um, which one is the most fun number? Well, actually, that particular study that I looked up. And they were looking at anything that could possibly be considered an adverse childhood event, including the financial situation of the family.
Hmm.
And they found out that it all leads to something, but really the strongest two events that will have an impact on whether you end up, and that was a study that was looking at correlating adverse childhood events and the use of healthcare.
Mm.
If you're more likely to, and it could be anything, emergency room use, going to see your doctor, pain. Pain. You're 24% more likely to report pain if you've had two or more adverse childhood events.
Oh.
This is bad. I mean, you talk about physiosomatico,
Yeah. Yeah.
psychological,
Yeah.
like how do you end up with pain?
Yeah.
You
Well,
probably
pain,
know more about
well,
this,
I
but
mean, there's a whole specific field of depth psychology called somatic depth
mm,
psychology. So it is really exploring and coming into relationship with this pain. Or Eckhart Tolle, if you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle, he talks about the
Yeah.
pain body, right? So yeah, so chronic pain is a manifestation of inner suffering.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to me it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
you know.
So like as most of the research looks at correlating stuff that we kind of already know
Okay.
instinctively. You got a bad childhood, you end up
But,
needing.
to your point, and where I get frustrated too is, the brain, now there's neuropsychology, neuro, and I'm like, okay, all right. So you've confirmed what intuitively makes sense. To what end? What is the end? And what I really appreciate about your work, which is why you'll have to figure
It's
out
my mom's work. You have to
which way
give
to go.
credit where
Well,
credit is due.
your company's work
Yes.
is that you are actually about healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I know.
you don't need it to be keep proven to you. You're like, in the meantime, and I don't know if this is connected, but like I'm detaching from the whole medical world. I don't go to like I when I came of age, it was the age of supposed prevention. Kids go to the doctor 6 month, 12 month, 24 month. That still makes sense. But as an adult, every year you go get this and you go get this and you're going to test it for this. And actually, I know there's other research about how prevention can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you get people stressed out about getting breast cancer by making them get a mammogram every single year, now they don't, so now they
Did
don't.
you? Oh, I don't remember the name of that professor. She's all about the mind-body connection. So you probably have
Yeah,
heard of her because she's been doing studies since the late 70s. And she did a really uh, uh, she looked at borderline cases where if you pass a threshold, you're diagnosed with something. But if you're just below that threshold, you're not diagnosed with that thing. And they
mm-hmm.
look at the evolution of the disease in those two categories of people. And the people who were told they were diagnosed with it, their situation worsened.
Of
And the people
course.
who weren't told, they said, no, no, you don't meet the criteria, their situation improved.
Yeah.
There's another
Yeah.
one where, oh, it's some crazy stuff
Yeah, so
where,
I mean, it's like I don't know. It's like we're circling back to something, right? So part of our rhythm of evolution is to go back and bring forward that wisdom that still is true. And so when we bring it back, we're innovative about it, but it's just, I don't know, it's a whole other conversation, but there are these forces, right, that are trying to keep us from being empowered in our own health because then it impacts somebody's pocketbook, and it's very manipulative. I mean, the system really is designed to get the results it gets, and in this country it keeps people unhealthy because that's profitable, and that's just a fact. And so so
I
I'm
don't
a,
know a lot of anything west of the Black Sea, anything west of that, it feels to me like it's all designed by the same system.
yeah,
I don't
so
know of a country
it's
that
time to take our power back, man.
yeah.
So all right.
Power to the people.
Yeah, well, that's right. So, okay, so my last question has to do about, I mean, you already shared a specific example of what somebody could try. So I wonder if you have another, like just
So I
another,
talked about smell and pairing smell and touch, and I feel
yeah.
like if that's all you do, it has so many positive
And
benefits.
by the
You
way,
do that.
wouldn't you say you can do it on yourself too?
Yes, yes,
Right.
it's
You
not
don't,
as great. Well, it's pros and cons. If you can have the perfect bactical administered to you while
mhm.
you're in a passive
So you're
state,
receiving it.
then you can focus your brain, all it has to do is perceive.
Okay,
But
got
if
it.
you do it to yourself, it has to administer, move,
Got it.
plan, and it dilutes and you don't
Okay.
have you cannot change the brain as a result. You'll feel great. It'll be awesome. But if somebody but if you do it to yourself, you do it just right, right? Just deep enough and in a perfect, oh, let to the left, right there. And that elevates the sensation.
Okay.
And that could, and if you combine it with another pleasurable activity, then because you have that burst, like that 400% release, then it becomes therapeutic. So
Okay.
if you just back scratch yourself or smell yourself, it's fine. It's good, but you don't get the change in wiring that you can do by pairing. and
Okay.
doing that consistently. And by that, I mean twice a day.
Okay.
What is going to happen if you do that well is you're going to get worse in about a day.
Oh.
And that's how you know that you've actually triggered a change in the brain. I don't
Oh.
know if you've ever taken medication or stopped taking medication or started a diet or stopped a diet or anything that has an impact on how your brain works
Yeah.
will trigger a regression initially.
Well, that seems to be part of growth, that right before a spurt of growth, there is this like sort of
Yes.
regression.
And
Okay.
yes. And
All right.
so when our clients call us and say, "You promised me my kid would be my worst nightmare, and I didn't think it could happen. It's happening." We say congratulations, and it's a bit of a fun conversation. Fortunately, it doesn't last very long, and within a few
Okay.
days, your brain has stabilized with this new level of activity and growth, and you can continue on. But you need to keep the momentum going. The
Okay.
brain is designed to protect you, and one of the ways it does that is by conserving energy. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot of energy to rewire itself.
Yeah.
And so you have to nudge it respectfully, but
Well,
consistently.
we talk
So,
about the psyche the same exact way. It's a closed energy system. It's just the energy has to shift and you have to take it from someplace in order to focus on something new. And
and it's
it
funny
can,
because that's what I
yeah.
think is happening during
Yeah.
that regression phase is that the brain has to let something go in order
Yes.
to adjust. But it's only a working theory. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
something we came up with.
Yep.
It's a way of explaining it that makes
Hmm.
sense to us, but
Hmm.
we don't have data for that.
Well, so okay. Is there, I mean, I think I touched on everything I wanted to touch on. And, you and I met each other a few months ago. And, one of the things that we have in common is that we have these amazing programs that we're trying to get out into the
Mm-hmm.
hands of more people. And so, part of my new strategy is partnering with people who are offering amazing programs and helping each other out. So for you, tell my listeners, like, and I'll put all the links in my description box. Like, where do you want them to go? Where can they go to get maybe some more education, some more? I love your blog, by the way. So your blog posts are really informative. And, I don't know, everybody knows somebody who is challenged with something. I mean, honestly, there's something for everybody on your website. So, but where do you want people to go?
We have some free guides that you can download on our website, and they're kind of like an entryway into our program
Hmm.
where in 5 to 6 pages we explain what it is in the brain that we're trying to help and how we're doing it, and then describe the protocols. So we got three popular ones, and I'll name them to you. And I don't know if we want to put all three of them
You can
because,
you can just let me know what link to share. That's fine. And
well,
then as far as like people who might want, your program, is there like an ideal sort of like how does somebody know? I mean, I guess if they go to their website, they'll know if they like you have a program that they need, but like
yeah,
can you tell my listeners like, "Oh, our perfect sort of client is somebody
our
who's in
perfect
this
client
situation."
is the one who wants their kid to be happy.
Oh, okay.
And they have already done things in the past to change their lifestyle to increase the likelihood that their child's going to be happy.
Okay.
And whatever that is, that's our ideal client because we're going to give them homework. And it can't be a new thing because it's going to be hard to do homework. The homework is 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the problems is it's too short. It's too easy to say,
Mm.
I'll do it right after this thing that I'm gonna
Mm.
do this, and then I'll bring in my kid and we'll do some sensory enrichment. We'll have a moment together. And I think if it was 2, 3 hours, then they'd be forced to schedule it and
Mm, true.
push things aside to then put this in, and then they'd benefit. And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to
Yeah.
package the five
Okay.
minutes into a 3 hour program.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. All right.
Well,
And
that's an
I'll
idea.
I'll share well, tell us your website and are you on social media? Do people follow you on
Yeah, if
Instagram and
you Google Mendability, you'll find us on YouTube. We put
Oh,
all of our
okay.
podcasts, and we've got a bunch of webinars, and we got some samples, and we got a bunch of stuff there. And we're on Facebook and
Okay,
and
fantastic.
Instagram
So
and
you
stuff. I
you
don't, yeah.
you could just give me all those links. So Thanks so much for being on Dose of Depth.
Thank you, Deborah. It was lovely to talk yet again. We need to
Yeah.
do this more.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, thank you everyone for I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kim of Mendability, and I hope we inspired you to wonder about the healing properties of your brain and also wonder about the traits associated with autism and other spectrum challenges, and just what are these traits and what are the kids mirroring back to us. And we're not here, it's not about fixing people, it's really about relating to people. So, and then one more thing, if you enjoyed this interview, please like, subscribe, and share, and also support my production of this free content as a monthly supporter. I'll include that link too. And then also check out my new coaching program, Depth of Wisdom. It's a deep dive into your unconscious to uncover the root of patterns that aren't working anymore, or the patterns that aren't working anymore. And you'll also learn the body parts, how to harness the wisdom of the body and breathe better and get relief from anxiety. And then how your life is connected to, your ancestry. And then finally, how sexual energy seeks to flow through you to create something new in service of others. And I'll include a link to that program plus a free resource you can get as well. So until next time.